Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BlackUSA.News. My name's Doni Glover, and we're coming to you live from America. There she is, Judge Leonia Lloyd. How are you, Judge?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm blessed by the best. No need to be stressed. There's my dear friend, Marsha Jews. How are you, Marsha Jews?
Hello.
Hi,
How are
Marsha.
you? Hey, Judge. How you?
I'm fine.
Girl, I'm trying. I'm trying to get all of it together. It's not coming. It's not happening. So just bear with me.
I'm doing the same thing.
Woo.
Okay.
So
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, what's happening
Yes.
in Detroit?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, we're trying to make sure we get back to normal, but some people are rushing out there. I ain't rushing. I'm taking my time.
Girl, I've been in the house for over a year. I don't care what nobody says. And they joke me. They joke me. They joke me. They joke me big. And I don't care. I've never cared what people thought. So I really don't care now.
Right. When it comes to my health, I have to do what's best for me. And those who want to rush out there, go right ahead. You can do that. But I listen to what my doctors tell me, and I got the shots. I did all that. But, I'm not going to rush out there and think I'm Supergirl and nothing will happen to me. I'm not going to do that because I've had some people I know and I've lost. So,
Right. Me too.
you don't
It's
think.
not a game.
No, it's not. It's not. I remember when I was just about finishing the book, and a lady who has a TV show here said she was helping me identify some people, and she said, Leon, you got to let me do your book interview first. And I said, okay. I said, no problem. And less than a month later, she was dead. See, and when I saw it come on Facebook, I said, it can't be. I just talked to her 2 weeks ago. What? And that's how it struck me. It struck me. And my cousin's mother died, and she died at the very end of January. We looked back at it, and we said, based on all the symptoms, can't breathe, intubated her, all that stuff, she probably had COVID. She was in a nursing home. But see, they didn't label it at that time. So she was one of those that was not counted. And another friend, same thing with health. So to me, it's not a joke.
Listen, it's not a joke. And my daughter and my grandson and I, we all live together. And he's 13. And we sat down and did the research, and we decided that we were not going to take the shot. But if we're not going to take the shot, then how are we going to live? What does that lifestyle look like?
Right.
And we outlined the kinds of precautions and the things that we really needed to be able to do.
Right.
And can we do that? She who's out and about and the social butterfly. And how do you really deal with that? And we talked about it. We really talked about it. We really researched it, and we decided that we were not going to take the vaccine.
Okay.
But you will not see me out in the street. You will not see me at the party on the corner drinking no glass of wine. You'll not see me at the concerts. You will not see me just walking. You will not see me unless we're way out in the country and there's nobody out there. And then we went to the park way out there, and then the people came and they didn't have no mask on, so we had to run to the but that's real. And some people are like, oh yeah, well, that's really crazy, and but those are life. We're talking life and death.
Right. And when I used to sit on the bench, if people had the flu, that saying, Mikey gets everything. Well, I was like that, and it would get, all of a sudden I would be sick, and I didn't know where it came. I didn't know where it came from. I didn't have it around me, etc. And one time I went to Miami. I came back. The day I came back is when I came down with the flu, and I didn't know what it was happening to me. I know I had a fever 102. I didn't know.
Wow.
And I made an appointment for the doctor, but I couldn't see him 3 or 4 days. Meantime, feet red, hands red, everything. I'm just burning up. And so I was off, and I told my case managers and stuff. I said, I don't know where I got this from. They told me where I got it from. They told me the case manager who had it, even though he tried to isolate himself from me.
Yeah.
All the files he touched that came to me,
Mhm.
and I'm going through them and I'm looking at them. And we didn't do the wash your hands after you finish, handling this or handling that. And so they said we all got it from him. But then what they would do is hide from me.
Uh-huh.
But I got it, and it was really bad. And so the doctor told me, he said, the flu season has been over. I don't know how you got this. He
Right.
said, where you got? I said, from one of my staff. When defendants would come in and they would say, I'm here, Judge, I just came back from the emergency room. And but I made sure I got here. And I said, hey, Bammy. And they said, I said, well, why were you there? They said, I had the flu. I said, oh, no. Bye. Bye. I said, we'll give you another date. I said, and I told them, look, let your people know if they have anything. We'll give them another date. Don't even come, because I'll catch it. I said, I will catch it. So
Right.
that's with the flu. I mean, so I'm susceptible.
Girl, this is not a joke. All of these diseases that float in the air and you can inhale somehow by being around people, they're in the air. It's in the air. And so you have to be very cautious and vigilant, for
Right.
real. And I don't know.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Hey, Don.
Happy Juneteenth.
There we go. There
Yeah.
we go. Yes. I like that.
Oh, go ahead, girl. I love it. Are you selling those?
No.
That's a side business, child. Because everybody, their mama will put it up on the internet. You sell it. We'll talk about that offline. Yeah, you sell all that.
The holiday just passed as a national holiday, and already JCPenney has like a Juneteenth section in the store.
I saw that.
I'm like, oh my goodness.
I'm glad to see it.
Let's start there. Corporate America has embraced it.
Yes.
First of all, what is Juneteenth? Judge, you want to go into this for us? What exactly happened?
Okay, this was back in January 1st, 1863. That's when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. And then 2 years later, in Galveston, Texas, in 1865, when the troops came announcing slavery was abolished in this, the Civil War was over. The slaves didn't know. Well, it was a lot of reasons why it was this a little over 2-year gap before they knew, and it was blamed on a lot of different things. And I think it was a little bit of everything, but a lot of it, the plantation owners had a lot to lose. Okay, because even though they were telling them, we want you to stay where you are, but you will be employed, you will be paid, etc. A lot of the slaves said, I'm out of here. I ain't staying here. And, they didn't want that, but that's ultimately what happened. And so, we look back, and it's funny. I remember when I first heard about this, I had never heard of this date. I had never heard of this date. I had never heard of a celebration regarding this, like it was our Independence Day. This is the one we should be celebrating. Like they said on a special I looked at the other day or last night. It's not like, back in the day, our folks was cleaning up behind the 4th of July for white people. So that wasn't something that we were celebrating in terms of freedom and all of that. But we look now, after all of that has happened, and what we've accomplished a lot of things. And I'm very proud of a lot of the things that we have made strides for, but we're still trying to get equal justice. We're still, when I heard D.L. Hughley talk about, we still haven't passed an anti-lynching law.
Right.
So when, or they're trying to make sure the schools don't bring in these new classes talking about racism, talking about systemic racism and what happens. If you do, we're going to cut your funds. Well, it's like he said, how can you tell kids they got a day off? This is, the proclamation, anti-slavery, all that's gone, and no one's going to be able to discuss slavery.
Mm.
I mean, you don't want them to. You're making it so that they will be penalized, but yet still you got the day off. So, that's my start.
Well, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, Marsha, this country has so much to rectify and just restore and repair of the stuff that they've done to Black people. And we're just a resilient people. So
Yes.
and amazingly resilient, forgiving. We're the soul of America. We really are. We are just the soul of America. And the culture is so, if we hadn't been here, I like what George Fraser said. He says, don't think that we were taken from Africa. What if we were sent? Another thing, like to save it, to really help rectify it, to really save them from themselves. He said, what if we weren't taken, but we were sent? He says, so wouldn't you have a different perspective, like what our assignment was really for here? And you realize that they have emulated a lot of our culture, our food, our style, our language, our just that we're the cultural influencers over everything, music, all of that. And so I was thinking like, that is really, really different, that we weren't taken, we were sent. In a larger scheme of things, of the purpose of like why. And so when you look at all the things that the critical race theory, people just learning about Tulsa, people just learning about so much. Racism is ignorance. And so now all these things are just having the holidays just makes people just wondering like, what else don't I know that's in my background that I should know? Because it wasn't just Tulsa, but some other areas as well. And Nikichi talks about that too. It wasn't just that. It's a lot of areas. And it was like, oh my God. So what else don't I know? So it helps people to be thirsty for knowledge, to really want to know more than just like, oh, Juneteenth, you get the federal holiday. But okay, if I just learned about Juneteenth, then what else is there that I need to know about? What about the, like, Judge said, the anti-lynching law? What about the bill that was introduced to George Floyd in 2020, still sitting there? It's so the politicians, they have a lot of work to do, but we have to push them. And a lot of it starts with being aware what to push them to really concentrate on. Juneteenth is nice, but I don't think we were just like saying, like, we marched all 2020, just said we have a Juneteenth holiday. That was not the number one agenda that we were looking for.
What Pamela says, right? It does make you want to know more. When I looked at Tulsa and learned about that, and I really got in depth with my lawyer on that, because he was working on that project with the survivors of Tulsa. Then it hit home for me last week when I got a call about my uncle and his remains that were found. Now, I mentioned him in my book because I said he built a school for young Black children. It was burned down by the Klan. And he then got buses to take the kids to school because they couldn't get there any other way. And he had a burial site, and he wanted a statue erected on that site. Well, that was years and years and years and years ago. Okay. And all of a sudden, I get a call because he owned over 300 acres of land. And that land was sold. Well, this is when things get pushed under the rug. Okay. I talked to a lady who was a person who's a real estate, salesperson. And she said, I wanted to know, we bumped into his grave on the property. And she said, and we read it, and we said, Mr. Chisholm is here. And she said, and it was huge, you know. And they said, we got to find out who he belongs to. And they put it on a news story, and it went out, and it got to my cousin, and it got to me because I'm a direct descendant. And then I found out all these things, how they celebrated this man in 2014, Rockhill did, and that he brought a pipeline, a water pipeline to the houses of Black folks that did not and could not get water. And then I said, look, all those articles you're finding, would you please send those to me? Because I never met him. He's my uncle. He's my mother's brother. And here we're talking about history trying to be covered up. When I went down there, I said, if my uncle is in there somewhere, all this grass, all this stuff, I said, find him. I told my cousin, Pam, find him. Her name's Pam too. And I said, find him. Is he there? And a few years later, this is what happened. How many more stories are there out there like that? How many more stories of surviving the Klan like my family did? Things that were destroyed, things that Black people, as Pam said, were resilient, and they came forth and they made a way, you know, for other folks. It's just how much more. And then when you have, like Pam talked about the critical race theory, you got folks that don't want us to have this because we've got to talk about the taint of racism. And how it affects other things. It's a framework because it affects Blacks who try to get bank loans. The taint of racism affects getting into very powerful universities. It's even how we are treated by the police. So racism goes a lot, and you have to discuss it. It has to start somewhere. And if it doesn't start at the schools with the young minds of young people who are coming up, those people that marched for George Floyd were white folks out there too. A lot of young white people, a lot of white communities that were totally, basically all white, were coming out for that. You cannot say, we don't want to educate white children, so they become different types of people in the next generation. It doesn't have to be repeated. You don't have to run and hide. You're so afraid that it's going to be a taint on white people. It is just a reckoning of saying, this is what has happened. So we won't repeat this. Yeah.
So let's talk about this for a minute. Pam, you had mentioned how there's so much history we don't know. One part of our history that we rarely acknowledge is that there were Black people already here in these United States when the European first arrived. All of us, many of us, have indigenous roots. And so one part of the story of slavery that's never told is how there were Blacks taken from America and sent to Europe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You muted, Pam.
Pam, you're muted.
I said, definitely. I didn't learn that when I was in school. Didn't know that until I was an adult, and probably at that point on my own African American history by going to different conferences, going to the African American Museum in Detroit, the Charles H. Wright Museum, which, you know, is open. Definitely, for sure. I'm headed down there today. But if you're in DC, maybe you guys have an African American museum as well. This just such a wealth of history, but it's a container information that we don't know. I remember the very first time I took my daughter. This is a funny story and a sad story at the same time. So we went through the African American Museum. Of course, she's going to public schools out here in the suburbs, and you know, they're teaching her things. And so we go through the whole museum piece and everything. And she looks And she says, Mommy, that first part of it, of the exhibit, because it talked about, starting with the slave ships and going on to it. She says, it looks just like roots. That's just like this. She says, did everybody just come? Are we all descendants of Kunta Kinte? I'm like, oh my God. I was like, we have got to do a better job of teaching you. I says, no, we're not all, no, everybody didn't come from Kunta Kinte and roots. And so, just going through the whole history of everything, and it wasn't even like before, we got to, to the United States from the slave ships, but it was like one of those things where it just brought all the way up, and it started in Africa. The first the first human they found the bones was really from the continent of Africa, and it goes all the way through, and it ends up to, like, I think it was like President Obama. But for her to go through it and to see it at a young age, then trying to put it together, where I know I didn't really hear a lot of African history until, I don't know, I went to a predominantly white college. So it was, unless I went to some events during Black History Month, I didn't really learn a lot of this. And I had to, like, it had to be your own journey. You have to make sure that you learn it on your own. And that whole thing about staying woke, kids say you got to stay woke or whatever. And I was like, stay woke. Can I just get woke? How about that? Because a lot of us not even told.
Well, one of the things I cover in my book, and it's newly released this week, is how Indians and Black people were pushed down into Florida. Pam, did you know that Florida was not an original colony?
Yeah, because my family's from Florida.
They called it Spanish Florida.
Yeah, I know that, because that my grandparents were from, well, as much, only know 2 generations, great grandparents and grandparents. So that part I did know.
So Blacks from Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Judge, if they escaped to Florida, agreed to fight for the militia, and converted to Catholicism, Florida had an Emancipation Proclamation from Spain that predates anything that happened here. So if you made it to Florida, you were free. And that went on until white folks wanted Florida. And did you know that Andrew Jackson was their leader? We got him on a $20 bill, but he was not Black people's biggest supporter. Andrew Jackson was big on Indian removal, and he was big on putting Blacks who escaped to Florida back into chains. And so that's where the hero of my book, his name is Chief John Horse. He was a Black Seminole, and he fought his way to a truce. They gave him Oklahoma. They promised him Oklahoma, and they promised him freedom if he would stop fighting. This is the Second Seminole War, which is actually the largest slave insurrection in the history of the United States. He led those Black people to Oklahoma, and you know how the white folks did. He got out there and they got new on him. What freedom? What freedom? I ain't promised you no freedom. And so he said, okay. He then led 200 Black families through Texas to Nacimiento, Mexico, where he served and his soldiers served as the border patrol. Then Mexico got new on him, Civil War ended, and he came back to the US. But the point in all of that is, in Texas, did you know that they have over 500 Black towns?
500 Black towns founded by Black people, you mean?
Yes. 500 East Texas. There's a whole university study on it and all. But essentially, roughly, I think, of the 4 million Blacks that were free after slavery ended, over 250,000 went to Texas. And they were starting Black towns. We started Black towns all over. And this man, Chief John Horse, the Black Seminole, he was the baddest Black man I ever read about. So it's a bunch of stories that have been hidden from us. But the real question I got for you, Marsha, is how would you feel finding out 2 years later that it was over, slavery was over?
Well, I lived in Houston for a while, and I'm originally from South Bend, Indiana. We didn't know anything about Juneteenth really back then. Nobody was really talking about it in South Bend, which was predominantly white. But in Houston and then on to Conroe, Texas, but you had to go through cut and shoot to get there, right? The conversation for Juneteenth was huge, and people talked about it all of the time. They talked about it because there were so many people that had been impacted that their generations of families were between that Houston, Conroe area. What I learned during that time was that after the Civil War, General Granger and his troops went to Galveston. Now, Galveston became this beach town, right? But there were a lot of things that were going on down there in all of those small communities that those white people were destroying us. And they didn't want us to know who we were and that we were free, because then they still had all this free labor. So if you have free labor, why would I want to change that? You know, they back in the 1800s, you're sitting here talking about Freedom Day. They celebrated it as Jubilee Day, Celebration Day, the Second Independence Day, and Emancipation Day, to name a few. And the amazing thing was that in the 1900s, they literally went ahead and dealt with putting it into the historical schools, into schools and into libraries. I'm telling you, we have a lot of issues that go on. I mean, I've got like, I don't know how many pages, because having lived in Texas with people who were born and raised in Texas, and all of the things that their generations that they still remembered that they went through in that region, not to mention what was going on from Texas all the way over to Mississippi, into Arkansas, into Georgia, and how many of our people were impacted with slavery, and how many of those people were my family who left those areas to get to South Bend, and all of the migration that happened, people running away from slavery. And so for us to be able to say at this time that it is now acknowledged, we've been trying to get it acknowledged since Martin Luther King, to let us know here's who we are, here's really our history. Our children really need to know the truth. We have made some major changes, but we have a long way to go. If we have George Floyd and Breonna and all these other people being murdered, it's the same thing as having the Ku Klux Klan around you, where you have police who still serve that whole slave master mentality, who still serve those racists who now have taken off those white hoods and robes and storming and creating a resurrection in Capitol Hill. Now, how is that possible in the United States of America in the year 2021, 2020, that we're going through this kind of living as Black people? And we have people who are in leadership and they still disrespect them. How do we reconcile Juneteenth to present day? How do we take what we've learned from that and change what's going on here? How do we deal with the fact that they're impacting how we vote? And how many of us are really looking at right now, making certain that all of our ideas in order, and that we've done what we needed to do to register to vote, to put more people who look like us, who are about us. That's important. People who look like us don't always think like us, and making sure that we put the people who look like us, who know how to live and to function and deploy the proper legislation to protect us. So Juneteenth has a lot to do with who we are today. We know you got to know your history, right? That Sankofa bird. You got to know your history to see your future. And we can't, if we don't see our future with us in leadership at every single level, then we will explode.
That is true. That is true. One of the organizations that I really like, well, there's a lot of different activist type of organizations. Obviously, the oldest ones are like the NAACP, the SCLC, things like that, the National Urban League. But one of the ones that I really like and I support is the Color of Change. And it's relatively new, but it seems really to how do I say it? They seem nouveau from the standpoint that the messaging is the same, but how they deliver it and the leadership is so cutting edge in terms of online things.
Yes.
So I mean, I've just seen them doing some movements, and they really came on the scene like Katrina just to really help galvanize a lot of people. But the Color Change, I just put it up in the chat over there, colorchange.org. They do such great work.
Yes, they do.
Whereas it's like it reaches the younger people to get them to move and to know what to really focus on that's important. Now, I don't know if Color Change was like really in front of like, okay, let's make sure that we get a Juneteenth holiday. I don't know if that's like one of their main things, but they do have different agendas where they basically they pull together online. You see a lot of them online, on Instagram, on Facebook. They're doing a lot of different things that make this whole digital piece should be easier versus like the NAACP. They didn't have these type of tools, right? But now they do. But that came about because of digital things, and so they're just really crushing it. I just want to give a shout out to them.
I know I get all their emails, girl, and I'm always sending them some kind of little something.
They are
it's
on
really
it.
important. Yes,
they are on it. I
very
really,
important
to them. I guess to younger people, it's kind of like their NAACP. You know. I guess that's
a little deeper and a little bit more progressive about their movement, and their call to action is immediate. They're not playing.
Oh yeah, they get stuff out there. They get stuff out there. And NABJ too, National Association of Black Journalists, when there's things that are wrong, like with Nicole Hannah Jones, they are out there on it, and they are really making movement on that. I love that. I love that.
Yep.
You know,
ladies, we've just been joined, excuse me, Judge, by another judge, Judge Alexander Wright, and we wanted to allow him to share his perspective. Judge, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much.
And the Judge Lloyd is in Michigan. Judge Wright is here in Maryland. Judge, what are your thoughts on Juneteenth?
Well, yesterday I played golf in the morning with another judge on the Court of Special Appeals where I sat just recently. I just recently retired, and I played. And the third was a public defender who had worked for the Maryland Public Defender's office for 29 years. And the fourth guy we just picked up, he was playing, and he worked for the UN, and we were all amazed as we walked the course that this had come to pass. It was almost like a bolt of lightning, and it's so significant. And I think that many of those who voted to pass it really did not realize how significant it is for Black people in America, that we have, as it may be said, another holiday, but a holiday that's so important, that really talks about our struggles throughout the 400 years that we have been in America. And I think that as we go on, it's sort of a pushback to a lot of things that are happening now. And we were all surprised, but also overjoyed.
Yeah, long time coming.
It's a long time coming. I know I went back just to see. I pulled out my course book, From Slavery to Freedom. last night, and I looked in there, and it wasn't there. And so then I looked at, I bought a book, The African American Experience, but it's in there, but only as one of the festivals that we hold throughout the year, but not a significant explanation of how it came about. So I think that Juneteenth is something that even those who have studied African American history, and I was a history major in college, it was sort of glossed over, but I think it's so very, very, very important.
It's
Well, how
huge.
can we ensure that this is a part of our education now? I'm not seeing an emphasis. We have elected officials here in Maryland, Judge. We have one of the highest percentages in the country, but it's not translating into Black business, in the proper education about our history. How do we have that? And we're all pushed to vote Democrat here in Maryland. It's pushed down our throats, but this history is not treasured.
No, it's not treasured, and I think that hopefully that this may be a starting point. I know I would, yesterday, I went in town because I live in Ricestown, which is outside of Baltimore. And I went in town to visit my mother at a nursing facility where she resides. And I was coming back home, and I passed this church, which used to be a school. And I saw a sign, Juneteenth celebration. And so I think that folks have picked up on it quite a bit. I know that I think the legislation was signed on a Thursday, and that Thursday evening, our chief judge closed the courthouses across the state. And so I think that we're picking up on this, and the question is, how can we continue to push it? How can we continue to tell people how important it is? How we can rally around it, and use it really as a tool. I look back that when I was a youngster, growing up in West Baltimore, just like you, Donnie, one thing that we had hope. We had hope, and we knew that if we worked hard, if we rallied our resources, as meager as they may be, and perhaps your resources are only your mind, but that's so important. And if we can use this in order to rally young people to understand that they can achieve in this society, even though the odds are against them. But unless you try, you can never beat the odds. And so I think that we need to use this as an educational tool. Perhaps those that attended that Juneteenth celebration yesterday, which used to be the Gwen Falls Middle School, but is now a church, that they learned something, and they could take something away from that, and they can use it throughout the year until Juneteenth rolls around again.
Is there a museum that's near you guys that is doing Juneteenth events? Because I know in Detroit, our museum is.
It is. It's the Reginald Lewis Museum.
Okay.
Reginald Lewis Museum, which is in downtown Baltimore.
Okay.
Is doing a program. They did something yesterday, and they're doing something again today. That is, and we also have the Blacks and Wax Museum on North Avenue here in town. I didn't see what they were doing, but I would expect that they would do a lot as well. We also in Annapolis.
Who is Reginald Lewis for those who may not know?
Okay, yes, Reginald Lewis. Reginald Lewis is a Marylander, and he was a
Beatrice
a
Foods?
businessman, and he, I think he went to law school, either Yale or Harvard. I think he went to
Harvard.
Morgan as well. But
No, went to
Harvard.
Virginia.
uh,
Went to school in Virginia.
he
I
went
think
to Virginia
Virginia.
University. Yeah, okay. But his claim to fame is that he made a lot of money. He purchased the McCall um, company, that makes clothing,
Patterns.
patterns, and he purchased that. And back in the 70s and the 80s, people would buy companies, and they would finance them, would take over. And so he was a takeover artist, but one that we're really proud of in Baltimore. And his fortune, part of his fortune, he seeded the Reginald Lewis Museum. One of the heroes of mine, George Russell, who was the first African American judge in
Mhm.
the city.
I love George Russell.
He spearheaded
Mhm.
this institution and got it passed and got it funded. And part of what they do is work with the school system. And I think every second grader or fifth grader comes through there once they're in that grade. And so it's a fabulous museum. I've been there a number of times. And they even have an exhibit of one of the most famous jurists in Baltimore, in the state of Maryland, my friend, Judge Robert Mack Bell. And so, yes, everybody.
Yeah, you got them. You got all of the boys.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Everybody who's a lawyer or a judge across the United States knows Robert Mack Bell. And also Thurgood Marshall's down there as well. So, and so they're doing several things today to recognize Juneteenth. And as I said before, hopefully, as we go through the year, we can continue to hold this up and use this really as a learning tool, and more than that, as an inspiration for going forward and achieving. Because as we know, this round table here, we can achieve and we can overcome all obstacles.
Reginald wrote a book called "Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun?" That's
exactly. Yes, indeed.
That's how I knew him, and it was in Black Enterprise. I'm a magazine girl, so I have different magazines that I always promote. So I would not have known about Reginald Lewis if it hadn't been for Black Enterprise magazine that did a whole feature on him, really doing an excerpt of that book. Why should white guys have all the fun? And that book came out in 1995, and I thought that was very bold. I was like, who is this black man talking about why should white guys have all the fun? That was like, what? And so
just got to add in, he is a Dunbar poet from East Baltimore, and he led the corporate takeover of TLC Beatrice.
Yes.
And he had an incredible work ethic. It is known that he went to work. He got there before employees and left after employees. And those that didn't demonstrate that same type of tenacity didn't stay there long, kind of like the NFL.
Yeah, and tragically, he died young.
Yes.
Yeah, so I do remember that he had
brain cancer. He died very young.
Yeah, his family is still very involved in the museum, and they have a lot of input in what goes on there. And I think that's really important. Sometimes we name things, but then we don't get the essence of the person as part of the leadership. So this is really important, I think, here.
Well, Detroit, I want to give a shout out because, me and Judge are from Detroit. So we have a Charles H. Wright Museum. And Judge, you want to tell them who Charles H. Wright was?
No, you can tell me.
You know the history of him better than I do, but I just
know. He was a dentist. It was basically a doctor. And he really, he realized that when people were waiting in his lobby to be a doctor, that they were sitting and they were reading different materials. And he started really bringing a lot of African centered material to the lobby. Became very fanatical about it. People were asking questions. Thirst for knowledge became about that, and he started leading trips over to Africa and bringing things back. And anyway, long story short, he started really changing his whole, buying more land and adding, like, instead of his waiting room, it became like next door was like the museum, and then it grew and grew, and then him and our mayor Coleman Young at the time kind of said, we're going to really give you a real museum, a real space. And that's really how it just started growing and growing out of his passion and his love for wanting people to know about their roots, about their history. And so Charles H. Wright, he's passed, and then his widow just recently passed, maybe a couple of years ago as well. But it was, before the one in DC, the largest African American museum in the country. It really was. It's a fabulous thing. And really, I'm just putting a plug in for the museum. It's our container of all our history. And we don't support it enough financially. And a lot of times arts is like the last thing that really gets funding from the government. And so the most of the people that come to the Charles H. Wright Museum are white people. Black people don't support it. I mean, they do like school trips and things like that. But like today, they have like a lot of things that are going on today. And then the other museum that we have in Detroit is the Motown Museum. That people love that one because that one's fun and cool and sexy and that sort of thing. You can learn history about Motown, but the Charles H. Wright Museum is really the history of African people in the diaspora. So the Motown Museum is cool too. That's getting a reface as well.
But you know what? I think, Pam, I'm glad, excuse me, both of you brought up the museums. And one of the challenges that I have is that we as people, we went through the whole civil rights era. We went through, the Black Stone Rangers trying to change and everything else. We've had all these organizations who were for civil rights and for changing who we are and what we're doing and how we're seen. And, the Black Panthers were feeding our children. They were doing things and empowering our communities. So if we sit down and we start looking at our history and we look at where we are today, and we have young people who are out there, they're marching, they're doing all kinds of things to change how we're seeing things in 2021. I mean, please, we have to work together with all these groups. I think it's a thing about the elders. You see all this white hair. It's the elders and these young people. We need to be able to work together and learn from each other. And even though we're at different generations, our missions are the same.
Right.
And collectively, we need to have one voice. We can't be in so many disparate areas and separated, and everybody's got to have their own ego happening in these different groups. Where we have to create, it doesn't have to be an organization. It's just all of our organizations and all of us individually and collectively pull together to work together to change. Right now, we should every person with melanin in their skin should be making certain that we have got everybody with ID and ready to vote for the next elections, local, regional, national. We need to be focused on priming and getting our leadership ready to take charge. We need to be able to have people with melanin in them. Keep touching it because it's the melanin in our skin. We need people. I want somebody that looks like Brandon Scott still sitting in City Hall. And we need to have City Hall full of Black people. We need to have the State House full of Black people. We need to have the county seats full of Black people. We need to be able to deal with how do we change this? How is it humanly? So I'm getting ready to get on it now. How is it in 2021, 2021, the first report in 1995 that came out of the Department of Commerce falling through the net? It's still online. Go read it. And it was the coin. Larry Irving wrote that report. He was the assistant direct secretary of the National Telecommunications and Information Agency in the Department of Commerce under Ron Brown, 2 Black men, 1995, under Bill Clinton. And he coined the phrase, falling through the net, the digital divide. And it was from that report that made me crazy. I said, wait a minute. Black people will have whatever is happening. That's the new hotness. Black people don't know what they don't know. Now, if you tell Black people gonna get it. They're gonna get it. And they're gonna make it better. All right. Why in 2021, I'm gonna say it again, 1995, 2021. And in the year of COVID, we have Black children who do not have computers in their homes. We have Black children who do not have internet connections. We have Black children who are missing a whole year of school because they can't connect to get their doggone curriculum, to do their classes. It is unconscionable that we have allowed this to happen. And I'm gonna talk about it, and I'm gonna say it, and I don't care. We got all these organizations. Everybody got a new Gucci. Everybody got a new tie. Everybody got a new dress. But don't nobody put no money into trying to make sure that their city, state, and county have those children with connections. You have all these Comcast, Verizon, all these companies that have broadband, and they charge a fortune. I got to get a white box, put it up on the wall, take cords and roll it all through my house because I can't get the connection. I got to pay almost $200 a month just for 3 of us to be on the internet. Come on now. And you mean to tell me that you can't put some broadband, a big wireless thing on it? We need to demand it. You're going to talk about Juneteenth and being slaves. We are slaves to these corporations, and we allow it. And then we go out and we spend major money, $500 for. I got a whole bunch of them for a purse, a pair of shoes. You guys, I don't even wear a cape. Come on. We need to reprioritize our lives and what we're doing in preparing our next generation. And we need to start with educating them. You got to know your history to see your future. You got to give them connectivity. You got to put leadership in place to change how we're doing. We should not be having these conversations in 2021. And we should all be ashamed of ourselves that we've allowed it to go on this long. And then we keep supporting all these people that aren't doing a daggone thing. They come out for a lunch or go have a dinner or here, come meet me for a reception. I can have a drink. We'll lull you with the BS, but you don't do what I need you to do to change my community. Come on. You want to talk about Juneteenth and emancipation? How about that?
I think I agree with Marsha and the judge. It matters who we put in office.
Yes.
It matters
yes.
on the local level so that our kids can have the kind of education to become the leaders we need them to be, to make the changes that we need to see. And until we change the governmental folks who represent us, that's not going to happen. They're going to put blockades everywhere you go. But we've got to make that change. When you talk about educating kids of the past, of our past, and then talk about how we're going to go out there and make sure kids, if another pandemic happens, how can they be educated? They can't sit up in a Burger King lot on the curb trying to get Wi-Fi in the air.
Well, they also have to have a device. We don't even have computers.
Well, you don't even have the devices, right?
You have superintendents making $300,000 a year, and children are leaving school functionally illiterate. But we can't every child can't have a handheld device to take home to do their schoolwork. Come on, get out my face.
And that's why our leaders, who we put there, when they see something like this, we've got to have people who have our interests in heart, that make those changes, that can stand up there and pass those laws, not the ones that are passing the law saying, We don't even want you to talk about slavery. We don't want that because it makes our race look bad. It is what it is. It is what it is. You know, suck it up and understand and learn from what your forefathers did, and let us go forth and let us have those young people understand and be educated. Juneteenth should be the jumping board. Juneteenth law that we're coming out with should be the jumping board. So we change it on all levels until you put people in positions of power that care. Now, Marsha hit that on the head. They got to care. It can't be a figurehead. They have to care and get out there and make the strides and be brave enough to make the strides to make it different for the people they represent. Then the change is going to come. And so it's important that these young people be educated properly. So when they go out there, be they white people, young people that are going out there, or Black, you understand where we come from. Our folks, I remember as a kid wanting to sign up for Black History at Mumford High School. I was ecstatic when they brought that class. Do you know I could never get in there? I tried for 2 years to get in that class. The thirst for wanting to know about our history, the Black kids were coming in droves trying to get in that class. He had to let the kids go out. He said, I'm sorry, all of those that ain't got a seat, all you lined up, all in the hallway, I can't take. That was us wanting to know who we were. Now, that was when I was in high school. Think about it now, the things that are coming up and out and unearthed. Okay, I wanted to know. And the young people I see out there now for the George Floyd marching, these are hungry, young, Black and white people out there, young ones, who want to do what's right. And when you got a pandemic, those are the ones who we elect. Those are the ones who are going to make sure that the school systems provide for areas like that that don't have the parents that don't have and cannot afford to get a cell phone for their kid. Forget about a laptop. They can't even afford the cell phone for
Right.
their kids.
Girl, they can't even afford to go get breakfast. You know, and I'm gonna be straight up. I'm gonna say this.
Right.
I'm part of an organization and we're creating this historical library in East Baltimore. And I called this dude that's a whole long story. But anyway, I called this dude over at Comcast. And so I said, I need you to put the stuff in there. Wire it up, put the things so people can come in and get connection. And he says, oh, okay. And he said, well, you know, okay, we can do that. But you know what? I think what would really be great too, you know, that's an opportunity because it's a whole neighborhood over there. Really, it's a whole neighborhood. And so the whole neighborhood, we could go and, you know, we have this $9.95 program that all they pay is $9.95, and we can get them on the internet. And, you know, of course, you know, they're going to have limited time on that internet. So that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, when he finished his sentence, I said, are you crazy? He said, what? I'm sorry, Mr. Hughes, I'm sorry. I said, are you crazy? Do you know what $9.95 can do in a household? That's a bag of beans. That's maybe some lettuce, might be some eggs for breakfast. And you want them to put it on the internet? You can't give them the internet in that neighborhood. You can't. All that signal is still out there. You mean you can't give it to them for free? So I'm going to go back to the expectations of these corporations. All they want is the money. They could care less. They could care less. And until we make them responsible and accountable, we're going to keep happening. Juneteenth, the lid is off. Slavery is over. And we have people who are right now mentally and emotionally slaves. And we have to change that trajectory for their lives. And let's do something different that's going to change the lives of the people for our future.
Marsha,
any thoughts?
yeah, Marsha, I just looked what you were talking about that digital divide. And it looked like just the other day that they did a rule that said connecting minority communities pilot program. And
where's this? Is that over here in the words?
Yeah, that's over there in the words. They just passed it on the 15th that it really 285 million to establish Connecting Minorities Community pilot program. But this is just really to provide grants to HBCUs and tribal communities and universities and minority serving institutions. But it's really like it's a grant, and it and like you said, this has been, I'm looking at it, it's been in progress since 1995 to bridge the digital divide.
What I tell you?
And
Right?
it's just like just ruling right now 285 million. I'm just thinking even the price of inflation, that's probably, you need to double it anyway since
No
1995.
question. No question.
But it's talking a lot of stuff about broadband and 5G and all of that. That is like the wild, wild west, because it's so little that we know about it. They can do whatever they want. They can charge whatever they want. They can give it limited time. They can not give it. It's like you said, it's out there anyway. But whoever owns that, they win the game.
Right.
And so it's like, where then do we get out of just being the person that is the consumer and the owner? How do we switch that around? Because that's where the power is. How do you get from not just being the person just always just on the outside, I'm consuming, but to really owning it? Is there a way to really be that person? I know, is it Byron Allen? He's a billionaire and he's got a lot of clout and that sort of thing. But maybe the whole part is about the internet, really understanding that part, like how to give the internet access to entire neighborhoods that can't afford $9.95 a month.
Correct.
And then they have it limited time.
So in here, in this box, because Pam, you do your research and I really appreciate it. So you'll love this. The intelligentcommunityforum.org. I want you to go. I think it's .org. It could be .com, but .org, I believe. And Intelligent Community Forum, in whichever one it is. They travel around the world and they look at communities all over the world to see what they're doing with high-speed networks and how they're bringing broadband or internet connectivity to communities, and they give them awards. So we're talking about from Taiwan to Saudi to way below Mississippi to Japan to Canada. To literally, it's a global organization. And I've had them on my show several times. Look that up. They have some of the most ingenious things that people are doing. One that I remember very well, and this was a while ago, probably when I was on the air with WEAA, down in LaGrange, Georgia. This again, it's almost 10 years. The mayor took it back. All the pipe, because all those corporations use those pipes. They put all their wires and all their stuff through the pipes underground, right? They took back all the pipes, and they had broadband put into the pipes, and they gave every citizen free access to the internet. LaGrange, Georgia. Now, given that LaGrange, Georgia is probably a couple 100,000 people, maybe it might even be 100, who knows? But it's innovative. That's just one that stuck with me. They said, wait a minute, get out the way. I want you to do this. And in order for you to even get your other connections in, you've got to do this, but you got to give it free to our community. Now, that's some brave, bold stuff happening. We have to look at around our country, what bold steps. Look up there and read this stuff. Talk to those people. You will find some stuff that is so interesting. And I've said it to several of the former mayors here. Anybody done none. Anyway, that's another conversation. But we need to make sure that we put the leaders who can hear, who want to hear, in place. We need to be aggressive and assertive as a people about what we want for our children, and that we're committed to the empowerment and the growth of our children. None of our children should be hungry. They shouldn't have to worry about lights and electricity and reading. They should be able to have a lunch in the schools that they go to, Come on, we've got to change this. And unless we, the elders, start doing something and bring those young people along, we're going to keep getting more of the same. And you're going to get more of these young people who are bitter and unhappy because they are just barely making it, and they're angry. And from that anger and that pain that they have to go through just to be a human being, then we get mad because they're acting up and they're acting out and they're breaking in and they're shooting and they're doing all this. You can't have a peaceful soul in another environment if you don't have it at home. And if you don't have what you need at home, and you got to look at other people who have and you don't have, and you're angry. Come on now. That's just, and that I don't even know, because there are people who are far more knowledgeable than I am. But all I'm saying is it's Juneteenth. I want this to be a celebration, quote unquote, of how we as free Black people help the rest of our people.
Judge Wright, you want to chime in?
Yeah, because what I was thinking about, and I think Ms. Juju, you pulled it all together at the end, and all these things are so interconnected. I mean, the crime and the grime, as well as the hopelessness, as I talked about before, because you don't have internet, you don't have a laptop, you can't connect to the educational resources that are out there, and then you feel hopelessness, and so therefore you act out, and that act out then ends up with violence, and then our political leaders focus on that rather than focusing on all these other issues. And so the question becomes, can we walk and chew gum at the same time? Can we talk about, can we bring this together? Can we say, no, bring in 10 more police officers to a certain community? Is that the answer? Or is the answer, why is that community so distraught? Why is that community so angry?
Say it again.
Do we not have resources?
Say it again.
Why, when we go to our schools are not up to par? We need to bring all these things together, and perhaps this is an opportunity. And our focus, we are marching. We have these safe streets. We're marching in order to keep the violence down. But can we also talk about education? And perhaps that's the reason that we have so much violence. And I said before, years ago, we at least had hope. And I think that now we have hopelessness. And that is not a way to turn our communities around. That's not a way to go forward. That's not a way to pull all this together. Education is the key. And we have to talk about it. When we talk about any problem, we have to talk about education as being a key to solving that problem. Right. Which includes broadband, which includes computers, which includes good schools, which includes higher education, the ability to seek higher education when it's not tremendously costly. I know when I left law school, I owed $3,000, and I was paying $51 a month, and paid it off in a couple years. Rather than those who are going to school now and on hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that part of it, education is too expensive. All these issues have to be pulled together, and we have to be operating on them all at once, right? And not here, a little bit here, a little bit there. Then this happens, so we switch over to there, and we forget about this issue. We cannot continue to do that and have progress.
I agree. I'll tell you something else.
This wouldn't be an exciting panel if I didn't start a little bit of trouble. Now, I hear what the elders are saying, but there's a whole new generation out there. Judge Wright, Judge Lloyd, this new generation even went so far as to lean on Monique, the comedian, when she told them that you shouldn't be, what did they tell him, Pam? Said you shouldn't be wearing a bonnet in public. Judge Lloyd, I can't ever imagine seeing you at the 7-Eleven in your slippers and your bathrobe. Judge Wright, I know darn well, knowing your family, you would never let any woman in your house go out there and mischaracterize everything our mother.
But the thing about it is, much stuff is going on in the world. The bonnet is not the issue. That was not that to me.
But
It's irrelevant.
Come out here for you to come out and start trending on some dang on bonnet is that is not
irrelevant.
the issue. There's so many other things that you could talk about.
It's
Not to them. Not to them.
Oh, okay. So I can't. I can't. And we get sidetracked on all the BS.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of young people who are out there that are Black Lives Matter, and they're doing the daggone thing. And I'm just really, really proud of them. And I love their energy. And so we have to build on what we have. We have to make sure that we start branching off with all of the things that we need. You know, they've got this thing, 10 million Black women or something, 1 million Black women and Goldman Sachs and all that. We need to tap into all of these things that are positive. They're supporting Black businesses, Black women businesses. We need to spend our time creating a quote unquote, you know, the Joint Center for Political Studies. And now I don't know what they call themselves. They've changed it a little bit, but that was like a think tank where all this information was distilled and put in over there. And so between that, that's where the information is. And maybe that's a start. I think that at this point, for me, Juneteenth speaks volumes that we're free at last, and people have to acknowledge it. But let's now make sure that we're free to grow businesses, that we're free to build companies, that we're educating our people, that we're free to do this. We have this, it's a law. So now what do we do going forward under Juneteenth?
Pam, tell them, Pam, we want the check.
Yeah, reparations. So yesterday, there was a lady from Evanston, Illinois. She was an alderman, and their community gave $25,000, was given $25,000 to people of African descent, reparations for housing. And that really sets them in a different trajectory for their family, right? And how they funded it, very ingenious, was from the cannabis industry. Mm-hmm. And then I asked her name is Robin. I said, so Alderman Robin, I said, is it just from the cannabis industry and the government and all that? She says, no, now people are actually seeding that. The community, they're giving money to the fund, the reparations fund, so they can give it to people, so they can have housing, so they can start building wealth for their family. Maybe at a certain point in time, they have too many school loans, so they can't get a house. You know what I'm saying? It's so like the judge was saying, it's just so many different pieces. It's like, okay, so how do you do this to do that? And how do you start? You know, when you're starting with nothing, if you're coming out of school and you say get an education, now I own $250,000 worth of debt. And now, okay, so I'll never own a home because so Evanston, and that's not the only city that has Judge Lloyd. They said in Detroit, they also are studying reparations as well. So it's like an area where public and also private people who are doing very well. And these allyship, if white people want to start their own reparations fund and say, we're going to, we feel bad at what we've done to Black people over the years, that let's try to level the field by putting our money where our mouth is. Let's do that. And $25,000 check just given to them. Get your housing together, start building wealth, leaving legacy for your family. Reparations is a start.
Yeah.
Juneteenth is nice, but that didn't put any money into the coffer so that we can change the trajectory of where we got to go next.
That makes sense, Pam. But you just said something that I'm stirring the pot. Hold on one second, because I want to relate to what Pam said. So forgive me, I'm on a roll now. So you talked about reparations and that it could possibly be funded by the cannabis industry. So now I'm going to take that to the next level. So when we talk about freedom, all those Black children in prison right now about those marijuana sales, we need to release them. I
Yes,
want them released.
that's it,
I
Judge.
want them
Let's,
released.
let's hear from the judges. They have dealt with
Yes.
that situation. Judge
Oh
Lloyd.
my
Yeah,
God.
I want them
well,
released.
my program was, when people came in and they were charged with those crimes, marijuana, et cetera, that my program was not to incarcerate you. My program was to help you get off of that to get on to more positive things in life, and then erase your record. So that I was about that all the time. So I'm all for when, and our state is doing something about that now, with legislation, which brings me back again to who we put in office. If you put people in office that have those same kind of goals like Marsha was talking about, and we are about to blow up the cannabis market here in Detroit.
Everywhere.
And then they're looking at making sure Black folks it can't be just outsiders. It has to be people that live here that have some of the input. But what about all that money it makes? We got to have legislators that say all these things that we're talking about. The kids that don't have what they need to be able to go to school, earmark some of that money. Earmark that for some of the housing problems that we have. Okay, they're building everywhere around here in Detroit. Earmark some of that for our community. It goes to who we put in office to make those changes legislatively. We've got a mayor who's trying to do what he's trying to do. But again, that money, and it's a lot of money that's going to be coming in from weed. A lot of millionaires are made real quick in Canada based
Legally.
upon the legalization of cannabis. We've got it here. And as I indicated, it's over 38 states been legalized, okay, medically, and it's growing. So we need to use the
Are
money.
Black people in there? Are Black people a part of that selling? Because my understanding is the dollar amount is so high, your everyday Black person isn't getting involved. At the same time, when it comes to incarceration, Black people are first in line.
Right. Well, that's what they're talking about in terms of Black folks have to have a major portion of that market here in Detroit. You can't let a lot of outsiders come in and decide to get rich off of cannabis, and that's because we have a mayor that's pushing that. Okay, the leaders who are elected are the ones that are the ones who are making the rules to the game. And if you've got a leader that cares that folks from the outside are not coming in here just to get rich, go back to the suburbs and live a nice, cushy life, you've got people that are saying that's not going to happen here. Okay, the stakeholders, and we've got Black stakeholders that are on TV talking about they put in the appropriate paperwork, etc., and to make sure that that goes through. Because again, the legislature can make those decisions about the laws and amend some of those laws and deviate some of that money to where we can use it and say this is the reparations for Detroit. This is how we're going to use it. We're going to help with the housing for Detroit. The housing that's going up, we're going to make sure that the people who live here can live in those houses.
Right.
Can live in those new condos that I see going up. Okay, you're reconstructing the streets. I drive them that I've driven on for 20 years. All of a sudden, I got to get a road map. I don't want to be sitting up there in a bus lane.
Or worry about a bicycle lane.
Oh, please. The bicycle folks have taken over downtown Detroit.
Baltimore.
Before, folks was afraid to come down. It was like, and when Coleman Young was here, and Coleman Young shut this down, you don't say cut the lights off when you leave Detroit. I was in law school. I got mad. And white kids were laughing in law school. It was like, that ain't funny to me. What do you mean turn the lights off? Coleman Young turned it around. Okay, all of a sudden we had folks coming in here to see what he was building. And the bottom line now, it's taken a whole new leap in Detroit. So all of that comes into play. But again, as Marsha said, we got to put the right people in and educate the ones coming up behind. And when they decide, because young people are deciding real quick, I want to run. I want to make a difference. I want to change some things. We've got to make sure those young people understand and know.
And support it. And we support them.
Definitely.
Train
Judge,
them and support them.
Yeah.
Judge Wright,
Let me
Judge Wright, black people make up, Americans, we make up 5% of the world's population, but we are 25%, Judge Wright, of the world's inmates. And a lot of people have marijuana charges. Now, I can't wait to hear your response, because
well, you know, once we have sentenced someone, that's basically our job is over. We cannot reach into the institution, and unless there was a motion to reconsider, then we can. So it's really a matter of the legislature and the executive branch. We did pass the Justice Reinvestment Act last year, which touched on some of these issues. But I know that in the last 20 years, we've had drug courts, which attempted to keep people out of jail and to work on these issues long before the executive, and at the same time that that they had these mandatory minimum laws. The court system had drug courts trying to keep people out of jail. I can remember my last 12 years I served on the appellate court, but I was a trial judge for 10 years, both on the district and the circuit court. And one of the most difficult days that I had to sentence 3 young individuals to a mandatory 10 years each. And as I remember, none of them were over 25 years of age, but I had no control. That's what these sentence called for. And in fact, it was really a trap, because what would happen is your first offense of drug distribution, they would give a probationary sentence for. But your second was a mandatory minimum of 10 years. Dang. So that was a setup for those individuals. And unfortunately, they that particular day, which is the hardest day I ever had as a judge in 22 years, because my hands were tied. So I think that as to marijuana, that's something that the legislators could look at. That's something that the executive branch could look at in terms of paroling these individuals who have sentences for the distribution of marijuana that they can't, but now the state can. And that does seem to be a disconnect.
That the state
it's a disconnect. It's a disconnect. It's a terrible disconnect. You know, it's really the states that are that there's an inconsistency in terms of federal law still mandates that you not use marijuana, and that's why several individuals who work in the White House were let go, because they use marijuana. And it's still, even though they may use it in Denver, and even though they may use it in Washington, D.C., the federal law says that you can't use it. So we're all over the place on these issues. And there's no easy answer. We have people serving long sentences. Hopefully, folk that are sentenced now will not get that type of treatment. Right. But it is an inconsistency. It's a disconnect. And so yes, no, I don't. I see it, but from where I sit, that's not much I can do about it. One of the other issues that you raised, Doni, was, I think, could be under comportment when you talk about what a particular person was wearing. And I think that ties into what we've been talking about, in that if that particular person at the 7-Eleven was getting their coffee because they were on their way to the Bank of America to work, they wouldn't be dressing like that. They would be dressing for success. And I think that what we are talking about this morning is that everybody get on the success train. And I think that these issues that we talk about in terms of how somebody dresses, if you're going back home, then why not just keep on your pajama bottoms? But if you have a good job to go to, you're gonna be dressed for that. And some of those things we talk about need not be talked about if we're all moving forward.
Well, one of the things
I agree. I agree with Judge Wright. If people have a different path and the projection is a positive one for them, their behavior changes. Their behavior changes. You don't have to tell them don't do X, Y, Z if they begin to see themselves in a more positive light. But we have to have something to give them to see that, something they can aim towards, and the system has to change to do that. That again goes to the leaders we put up the top. When you talk about the laws, and the judge is correct where he said he couldn't do much. Where I said we were here in Michigan and around, they got prosecutors now, head prosecutors who say we will not bring up prostitution cases. We're not going to charge them. In other words, if a police officer arrests her, bring her in, they're going to let her go. They are doing the same thing with marijuana cases, but they have new laws that they just got through passing where no longer will those be looked upon as felony situations, etc. So they are making the changes here. So that, and then they're looking at what do we do with the people who are incarcerated, and they are now going back looking at those cases, and the legislation is looking at those cases.
Good.
So we're making strides in that here in Michigan. They are making the changes because it's not fair for them to be sitting up there. It's just like the old war was cocaine versus crack. I mean, you're going to send somebody up for life for crack. It's the same substance, okay? Just in a different format, and different folks are using them, okay? The people who use the cocaine were not people with melanin in their skin, not as much. But the people who were on crack were, and they were, and that took a while to change that.
That pipe was a beast up in Detroit. I was living up there at that time. That was crazy. That pipe was a beast up in Detroit. I was living up there at that time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I will say this is the last thing I just want to say about the whole thing about Monique, about the bonnets and all of that. That she made a difference. She stated this. She said when she did something wrong, that it would people that would tap her on the shoulder and tell her, baby, don't do that. All right. And that was fine. And you have to realize that, if we do see someone that's younger than auntie such and such, or the elder will just say, baby, don't do that. This is a better way. What people were up in arms about was that she did it so public. It wasn't, baby, don't do that. She went out there and just put them on blast. That's really what they were mad about. If she had saw them in the airport and said, hey, honey, where you going? You got on your house shoes, your pajamas, and your bonnet. Where you going? And she just did it privately. It probably would have been okay. But when you do that to younger people and put them on blast like that, they're going to attack you.
Well, I ain't from that mob. They shouldn't have took that nasty self out there. She never would have had to say it. Wrong daddy. Wrong daddy. They should have known better. And their mother should have told them. Shouldn't need no celebrity to tell you right from wrong.
She did is she put them on blast on.
She should have put them on blast. They deserve to be on blast. Look at
there's a whole bunch of stuff Monique did that they can put her on blast. I mean, so now we got this whole thing going on. So what I'm saying is that there's so many other things to bring out on social media because it is such a powerful tool. She thought she was just going to do a quick little video, but it's just a powerful tool. I mean, we see how powerful it was. The little 17-year-old videotaped all the information about George Floyd. It's a powerful tool. Those teens and young people, they know how to use this. And she going to use it about some dang on bonnet? It's like, no, just tell them in the
I totally support her because we have taken this social media thing too far. People put too much of their personal business on there. And some things just aren't acceptable. And this
okay.
All right.
Bye. Thank you for having me. Have a nice weekend.
day the
It's
guy that
good
round
meeting everybody and good seeing all those that I've known for a while. Mwah, mwah,
Happy
mwah.
Juneteenth.
Happy
Happy June.
Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.
Go
Thank you.
out and do
Beautiful day,
something
everybody.
to help somebody.
Thank you
All
for
right.
inviting me.
We're
Thank
having a
you.
Juneteenth
Yep.
party today. We really are with all of our family.
Outstanding. Take care. I'm out.
Okay.